At the gala, the chandeliers above scattered light like frozen fireworks, and the air smelled of roses and expensive perfume. The room was a showcase of wealth and beauty. Silk gowns brushed the marble floor, crystal glasses clinked in practiced rhythm, and laughter rose in waves like a rehearsed symphony. I had chosen my dress carefully, every sequin catching the golden glow, every curl in my hair pinned with precision, because tonight was supposed to be the night I finally belonged. For once, I wanted to step into the same world where my sister had always reigned effortlessly. But as I stood there, nerves tightening my smile, I heard her voice slice through the music. It was sharp, theatrical, dripping with mockery. "Pathetic," she said, not softly, not privately, but loud enough for the circle around her to erupt in laughter. Their eyes turned to me, some pretending pity, others savoring the humiliation like a rich dessert. Each laugh felt like a needle against my skin, every whisper growing louder in my imagination, and my sister basked in it, as though my shame were her crown. I froze, clutching the stem of my glass too tightly, the sparkling liquid trembling inside. My cheeks burned, my heart raced, but I forced myself not to look away, because what she didn't know, what no one there could have guessed, was that the night wouldn't end with me as the punchline. Before it was over, the spotlight would shift, the whispers would change, and her laughter would catch in her throat the moment the CEO stepped in. And when he did, nothing about my sister's perfect little performance would ever look the same again. She had always been the star, from the time we were little girls twirling in our mother's jewelry, pretending to be queens of a palace that only existed in our imagination. But somewhere along the way, that palace became hers alone, and I was reduced to the fool in the corner, someone she could use as contrast to shine brighter. It was at family dinners when she'd roll her eyes at my career choices, or during holidays when she'd casually mention the price tag of her dress loud enough for me to hear, reminding everyone that she could afford what I couldn't. But tonight, at the gala, she elevated her cruelty into spectacle. She fed off the laughter of strangers, people who didn't even know me, yet were quick to join her chorus because they thought she was untouchable, the golden one. And I'll admit, for a second, I almost believed it too. My throat tightened, my eyes watered, and I wanted to disappear into the wallpaper, blend into the shadows of that glittering ballroom. But instead, I stayed rooted, forcing myself to endure, to listen, to let every single word, every chuckle, every smirk dig into my skin like a brand. Because deep down, something was shifting in me. I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. I wasn't going to hand her my dignity wrapped in a bow. I knew things she didn't, secrets she had overlooked, opportunities she thought were meaningless, but they were mine. And while she paraded herself as untouchable, she had no idea that the ground beneath her was about to crumble, not because I shouted, not because I caused a scene, but because of one man, the CEO, who was about to remind her that no crown stays secure when it's stolen at someone else's expense. I kept my gaze steady, even as my sister's laughter echoed across the ballroom, and I remembered every moment that had led us here. When we were teenagers, she stole my acceptance letter to an internship program and told our parents I wasn't selected. I found out years later, when the coordinator mentioned how unfortunate it was, that I had never responded. She had taken that chance, turned it into her stepping stone, and no one suspected because she wore innocence like perfume, sweet, overwhelming, impossible to question. In college, when I worked 2 jobs to cover tuition, she floated on a full scholarship she'd secured with connections through our uncle. At family gatherings, she would tilt her chin, smile sympathetically, and say things like, "Amelia's trying, bless her heart," as if effort were a badge of failure. My parents weren't blind, but they were dazzled. She knew how to sparkle in front of them, how to play the role of the successful daughter. And me, I became the backdrop, the comparison point, the lesson of what not to be. But what no one saw was how I learned to watch, to listen, to notice the cracks beneath her polish. She spent recklessly, invested poorly, leaned on charm to cover incompetence. When she bragged about being close to executives, I heard the desperation under her laughter. When she claimed she had everything under control, I saw the unpaid invoices shoved to the back of her desk. And when she mocked me tonight, calling me pathetic, she didn't know the CEO she so desperately wanted approval from had been quietly mentoring me for months. He had seen my ideas, my work, the proposals she had dismissed as too small to matter. What she thought was beneath her had caught his eye. That's why I was invited to this gala. not as her forgotten sister tagging along, but as someone with her own seat at the table. And soon when he stepped forward, when his words cut through the noise, her performance would shatter, and every person laughing at me now would see her for what she was. A fraud dressed in borrowed light, exposed in front of the very people she had worked her whole life to impress. The music swelled as waiters moved gracefully with trays of champagne, and I forced myself to stay perfectly still, my glass balanced between trembling fingers, though my mind was anything but calm. I thought back to the weeks leading up to this night, the late evenings spent drafting reports at my tiny apartment desk, the phone calls with the CEO where he asked me questions no one else had ever cared enough to ask. He wanted my perspective, my analysis, not because I was someone's sister, but because I had insights that mattered. I remembered the moment he said, "You think differently, Amelia. Don't underestimate that." It was like being handed oxygen after years of suffocating under her shadow. Still, I never told my family, never even hinted at it, because I knew how quickly she would twist it, how she'd claim credit or sabotage the chance before it could grow. Instead, I kept it hidden, protected like a flame in the wind, while she strutted around acting as if she already had his favor. And she tried, sending him expensive wine, arranging casual meetings, laughing too loudly at his jokes at other events. But what she didn't see, blinded by her need to dominate, was the way his smile tightened every time she interrupted others to make herself the center. What she didn't know was that behind closed doors, he had already told me he couldn't stand arrogance disguised as confidence. Real leaders, he said, don't step on others to shine. That phrase played in my head now as her laughter stabbed at me. She was stepping on me as always, certain the crowd adored her, certain no one could see through the act. Yet tonight, the stage lights were shifting, and though she thought she had written the script, the ending wasn't hers to control. I caught the CEO's eyes across the room just as her mocking reached its peak, and in that silent exchange, I knew it was coming. The moment where my humiliation would flip, where her empire built on belittling me would collapse in front of her audience. My sister thrived on control, but she was about to realize she had none. Not here, not anymore. She lifted her glass and smirked, her voice pitched just loud enough for the surrounding circle to catch every word. Some people are just meant to be background, decorative. Not everyone can be important. Laughter rippled again, sharp and hollow, bouncing off the gilded walls of the ballroom. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. I watched her tilt her head toward the CEO, assuming his silence was approval, when in truth he was measuring her with the kind of look only a seasoned leader gives, one that dissects, that calculates, that waits. I remembered how carefully he had prepared me for tonight without ever spelling it out. A week ago, he had called me into his office, closed the door, and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were plans, mine polished and expanded with his notes in the margins. "You'll present them at the Gala," he'd said, calm but deliberate. "And when you do, make no apologies for your voice. People have been underestimating you long enough." I had walked out shaking, not because I didn't believe in the work, but because I knew what it would mean to stand in front of her, to let the world see me without her filter of ridicule. Tonight, all of that was about to collide in real time. She thought the Gala was her stage, her arena where she could strut and shine, but it wasn't hers anymore. The CEO's voice suddenly cut through the chatter like a bell. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may." The crowd shifted. Conversations paused. All eyes snapped toward him. Even my sister straightened, flashing her rehearsed smile, confident that his words would only elevate her further. He stepped into the circle, his presence commanding without raising a hand, and for a split second, the entire room seemed to lean toward him. Then he said it, clear, steady, undeniable. "Before we go any further, I'd like to recognize the person who has quietly done the work that will shape our next big venture. Amelia Price, my name, not hers. Not the golden child, not the self-proclaimed star. Mine." The laughter that had filled the air seconds earlier evaporated, leaving a silence so heavy it was almost suffocating. My sister's face froze mid-smile, and in that instant, the mask she had worn so flawlessly began to crack in front of everyone who had once cheered her on. The silence was almost louder than the laughter had been. I felt it pressing against my skin, waiting, demanding to see what I would do now that the spotlight had been dragged onto me. My sister's hand twitched on the stem of her glass, the forced curve of her smile trembling as the CEO placed his hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of endorsement no one in that ballroom could misinterpret. Her analysis, he continued, scanning the room, predicted market shifts before our competitors even saw the signs. While some wasted resources chasing noise, she identified the core that will give us the edge for years to come. The words struck like thunder. This wasn't polite recognition. This was validation, public and irreversible. I thought of every dinner table where she had mocked my little projects, every holiday where she told relatives that I was still figuring it out, every moment where her laughter seemed to erase me from existence. And now those same relatives' friends, those same colleagues, were staring at me differently, as if seeing me for the first time. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of 1,000 nights of doubt begin to lift. "Would you like to say a few words?" the CEO asked. My throat tightened, but I nodded, stepping forward. The stage was no longer hers. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. I've spent years believing that being quiet meant I was weak, that if I didn't make noise, if I didn't fight for the spotlight, I had no value. But I've learned that the work speaks even when I don't. The crowd leaned in, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably as if remembering their own cruelties, their own dismissals of people like me. My sister's face was rigid now, her eyes darting, desperate to find an escape, but there was none. The CEO wasn't finished. "From this point forward," he declared, "Amelia will be co-leading the initiative. Her seat at the table is permanent." Gasps swept the room, sharp and collective. Co-leading. Permanent. It wasn't just recognition. It was power. My sister's lips parted as if to object, but nothing came. She couldn't laugh this away, couldn't sneer it into dust. Her empire had been built on the illusion that I was less. And that illusion had just shattered in front of everyone who once believed it. Her voice finally broke through the heavy silence. Brittle and shrill, nothing like the smooth melody she always used when she wanted the world to adore her. "This must be some kind of mistake," she blurted, laughing too loudly, the sound grating against the marble walls. "Amelia, really? I mean, she's sweet, but she doesn't understand the scale of projects like this. I've been in these circles for years." "Surely you mean—" "I mean exactly what I said," the CEO interrupted, his tone firm, his eyes locked on hers with a look that made even the most arrogant executives shrink. "Amelia's work is what impressed this board. Not her name, not her family. Her work." A ripple moved through the crowd, a mix of surprise and quiet satisfaction. I could see some of the women in glittering gowns exchange glances, women who had likely been dismissed by my sister in the past, written off as unimportant. Now they watched her unravel with a mixture of curiosity and delight. She tried again, her mask slipping further with every word. She's exaggerating, you know. Amelia tends to overstate things. It's cute, really, but she... My laugh was soft, unexpected, and it sliced through her words like a knife. "Cute," I repeated, my voice steady, strong. "That's what you always called me when you didn't want anyone to take me seriously. But the numbers don't lie. The reports don't lie. And neither does the CEO." Gasps flickered through the audience again, and my sister's face flushed crimson under her makeup, her jaw tightening until I thought it might snap. She looked around, desperate to find someone, anyone, to validate her, to restore her throne. But the crowd had shifted. No one was laughing now. No one was rushing to defend her. Even our parents, standing stiffly near the back, were silent, their eyes darting between us, struggling to reconcile the roles they had assigned us all our lives. The CEO cleared his throat, signaling the conversation was over. "Amelia's voice will carry in this company from now on. Let's toast to the future." Glasses were raised, the clinking sound ringing like a final judgment. And my sister stood frozen, her smile stretched thin and brittle, her empire of mockery collapsing in real time. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the background. I was the story, and she knew it. Her hands shook as she set her glass down too hard on the tray of a passing waiter, champagne spilling over the rim and staining the sleeve of a woman beside her. Gasps rippled again, but this time not for me, for her. She tried to recover, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her fury. "This is ridiculous." Amelia has always been fragile. She couldn't handle college deadlines without crying. She quit her first job after 3 months. Enough! The CEO's voice cut through her accusations like steel. He didn't raise it, didn't need to. The authority in it silenced her better than a shout ever could. All eyes bore into her, and the cracks in her perfect image widened until there was nothing left but raw desperation. She reached for our parents like a drowning woman grasping at driftwood. "Tell him. Tell everyone. Amelia's not cut out for this. She never has been." My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother pursed her lips, but neither moved to save her. For years they had fed her ego, propped up her throne, and now, with the entire room watching, even they understood the cost of siding with her. The CEO stepped closer to me, not her, and extended his glass. "To quiet strength," he said, locking eyes with me. The words landed heavy, deliberate, an undeniable contrast to everything she had just spewed. Glasses lifted again, but hers remained untouched on the table, abandoned like the facade she could no longer hold. She stared at me, fury sparking in her eyes, her painted smile finally gone, replaced by the raw, twisted look of someone who had just realized her power wasn't eternal. And I knew then that she wouldn't let this go quietly. My sister had always thrived on dominance, and losing it in front of an audience this large would cut her deeper than anything I could have done in private. Which meant the real battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. She disappeared from the ballroom after the toast, her heels clattering too quickly against the marble floor, the swish of her gown trailing like a storm cloud behind her. I didn't chase her, though part of me wanted to see the look on her face when the door shut behind her. Instead, I stayed, letting the tide of congratulations wash over me, executives shaking my hand, women whispering that they'd always known I had potential, men who once barely glanced at me now asking questions about my vision. But beneath the warmth of recognition, I felt a chill creep in. I knew my sister too well. Humiliation never ended in silence with her. It fermented, turned sour, then poisonous. By the time the gala ended, I already saw the signs. Our mother stiffly avoiding my eyes. My father muttering that I should smooth things over for the sake of family. A cousin warning me that my sister was talking to the right people outside by the fountain. She was spinning a new narrative, painting herself as the victim of an ungrateful little sister who had stolen her moment with cheap tricks. The whispers followed me to the cloakroom, where two women clutched their pearls and said, "Well, you know sisters, always a rivalry," before cutting off when they saw me. Outside, the night air was sharp, carrying the scent of roses from the garden, and I saw her by the fountain. Her face twisted in fury as she leaned close to one of the board members, her voice low but urgent. I caught only fragments. Jealousy. Unstable. Needs help. She was trying to turn the tables again, to weaponize pity and suspicion the way she always had. But this time, the board member's eyes slid past her and landed on me. He straightened, nodded politely, and walked away, leaving her mid-sentence stranded. Our eyes met then, and in her gaze I saw the truth. She wasn't just angry, she was terrified. Terrified that for the first time, her words weren't enough. Terrified that I had found a power she couldn't laugh out of existence. The next week was a battlefield fought in whispers, emails, and sudden coincidences that all bore her fingerprints. Anonymous messages arrived in executives' inboxes suggesting my data was plagiarized. Old acquaintances from college reached out saying they'd been contacted about my emotional instability. Even my landlord mentioned a woman had called, asking whether my rent had ever been late, pretending to be from a background check company. It was her style, always indirect enough to deny, always just sharp enough to wound. But what she hadn't counted on was that this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The CEO had warned me the night of the gala that pushback was coming. "She's built her life on controlling the narrative," he'd said. "You're disrupting that. Document everything." So I did. I saved emails, recorded calls, kept receipts. When she accidentally sent a group message mocking me, but addressed it to a list of my colleagues, I didn't reply. I forwarded it to HR. When she whispered to family that I was stealing company secrets, I produced signed acknowledgments proving the work was mine long before she ever touched it. Each move she made was a mirror of the old power dynamic. She pushed, I retreated. But this time I didn't retreat. I stood. Slowly, painfully, she began to unravel. Colleagues stopped taking her stories seriously. A board member confronted her directly about harassment. Even my parents, once her most loyal audience, grew quiet when I laid out the evidence in black and white, refusing to let her laughter erase the truth. The shift wasn't loud, but it was unstoppable, her empire of perception crumbling brick by brick. And still, she tried, showing up at events overdressed and overconfident, her smile stretched too wide, her jokes about me falling flatter with each attempt. The final crack came when the CEO called a private meeting, inviting both of us. She arrived certain it was her chance to win back her crown, But when she sat down, she found the folder already waiting on the table. Not hers, mine. Proof, line by line, of everything she had tried to bury and every attempt she'd made to destroy me since the gala. Her hands trembled as she flipped the pages, color draining from her face. For the first time, she had no script left. She sat frozen in that chair, the glossy folder open in front of her, each page like a blade slicing through the armor she had worn for years. Her lips parted, but no words came out, only the faintest sound of air, like someone drowning. The CEO leaned back, calm, deliberate, watching her the way a surgeon might study a tumor before deciding whether to cut. "This company doesn't reward sabotage," he said evenly, his voice echoing off the glass walls of the boardroom. "We reward results, and Amelia's results speak for themselves." My sister finally found her voice, but it cracked under the weight of her panic. She's lying, you have to see that. She's manipulating you. She always..." She stopped herself, realizing too late that the old tricks, the dramatics, the accusations, only made her look smaller now. I didn't raise my voice, didn't even look at her as I slid another envelope across the table. Screenshots of messages, timestamps, witnesses' notes. I let the silence do the work. Her hand hovered over the envelope, but she couldn't bring herself to open it. She already knew what was inside. The CEO turned to me instead. "Amelia, moving forward, we want you not only on the initiative, but as lead coordinator. You'll report directly to me." My breath caught, and I nodded, not because I needed his validation, but because I knew exactly what it meant. Her reign was over. My sister shot to her feet, her chair screeching back against the polished floor, her eyes wild. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice trembling as much as her hands. "She's nothing without me, you'll all see." And then she was gone, storming out of the room, her heels clattering like the echo of a dynasty collapsing. The door slammed, and with it the weight of years of humiliation finally lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt taller, not because she had been pushed down, but because I had finally stood on my own. The CEO's eyes softened slightly as he gathered the folder back into his hands. "Don't waste energy hating her," he said. "She'll do enough damage to herself now that the truth is out. Focus on what you've built. That's where your future lies." I walked out of that boardroom into the crisp air of the city evening, my reflection in the glass doors no longer the shadow of someone else, but my own figure, defined, unshakable. But even as I stepped forward, a part of me knew it wasn't the end. My sister would never surrender gracefully. She would wait, she would plot, and sooner or later she would try to claw her way back. And when she did, I would be ready. Weeks passed, and for the first time in my life, silence felt like peace rather than punishment. I no longer flinched when my phone buzzed, no longer braced for her laughter echoing across a room. I poured myself into the work, into building the initiative I'd been trusted with, and every late night at my desk felt like planting a flag in soil I had finally earned. The recognition was real, not borrowed light, not a favor, not a hand-me-down from someone else's connections. My name began to circulate in meetings, my reports cited in conversations I wasn't even in, my proposals shaping strategies months in advance. And still, she lingered in the shadows, trying to claw her way back. Rumors trickled through. How she had shown up at another gala, overdressed, drunk, loudly telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen her place. How she had tried to launch a side business with borrowed money, only to watch it collapse in a matter of weeks. How she was calling family members late at night, sobbing, begging them to intervene on her behalf. My parents, once her staunchest defenders, began to sound tired, worn down by her demands, their voices heavy when they mentioned her. For the first time, they didn't ask me to fix things. They didn't tell me to smooth it over. They simply said, "We don't know what to do with her anymore." I knew then that she had crossed into a place even they couldn't rescue her from. The final blow came quietly, not with a scream, but with a letter. The board had reviewed her behavior, the harassment, the slander, the reckless attempts to undermine not just me, but the company itself. Her contract was terminated, effective immediately. I read the announcement twice, 3 times, letting the words settle like the closing of a book I had been trapped inside for far too long. She tried to call me after that. Voicemails full of rage, then tears, then rage again. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. There was nothing left for me in those conversations. Nothing but old patterns I had already outgrown. Instead, I left her messages unheard, her number unreturned. And I turned back to my own life, the one I had built without her permission, without her shadow dictating my worth. I learned something in all of it, something I wish I could whisper to every woman who has ever been silenced by someone else's laughter. Revenge isn't always a scream or a fight. Sometimes it's standing so still, so certain, that the person who thrived on cutting you down collapses under the weight of their own emptiness. My sister lost her throne because it was never hers to begin with. It was propped up on my back, my silence, my willingness to be small. And the moment I stood tall, it crumbled. Now, when I walk into a room, I don't look for her approval. I don't wait for her to set the tone. I take my place without apology. And if she ever walks in again, if she ever tries to resurrect the old script, she'll find there's no stage left for her. Only me, unshaken, unbroken, and no longer hers to mock. Tell me, did I go too far, or did I finally go just far enough?